because it
Which is
rejects
materialist.
it. No, because it rejects the view that axioms and propositions of logic and thought are the only manner by which reality is accessible to thought. And they reject this view. And they reject the most advanced form of idealism, which is the analytical retardation.
It literally has zero to do with materialism at all.
Yes, it does. Because
Literally nothing to do with
because
materialism.
what?
In fact, empiricists are the materialists. That's what
No,
Marx tried to
no,
do. He
no.
took
You're
Hegel's
no.
bullshit method of dialectics, and then he took British things of this like capitalism.
I've never read Marx. I've never read Marx. I've never read
And, like,
Marx. Explicitly
science-
rejects that view. Explicitly
Marxism
rejects
is
that
just
view.
soy. I want to debate on materialism versus idealism.
All right, go ahead.
So materialism is the belief in the existence of objects outside of human cognition. Is that how you take materialism?
No.
Then what is materialism?
Thank you so much, MJ. Appreciate the 50. Thank you so much, man.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Materialism is the orientation of the human intellect toward content, to the Yeah.
Well, you cut off for a second.
Okay. To me, I'm echoing. So, to me, materialism is simply the orientation of the human intellect toward the content of reality.
And the content is material.
You can call it content or you can call it material. It's the synonym. It's the same thing.
There's no content without form. You can't. No one can observe a pure content that is devoid of form.
Yeah, but to me, form is a result of the interaction being itself material, and therefore form does not premise anything.
Yeah, the interaction is of consciousness giving form to objects, which is idealism. So you're an idealist.
No, because that's not what the interaction actually is.
Then what would the interaction be?
The interaction is the torsion out of which reality reflects back upon itself. First of all, that is what we will call consciousness or whatever. Form is simply referring to the way in which this contradiction, this fundamental difference, is posited across its particular instances. And what that means is that when most people think of materialism, they focus on identity, and that's why they talk about substances and atoms and things like that. When in reality, at least materialist dialectics focuses on the materiality of differences and contradictions.
That makes no sense. That's just jargon. You still haven't described what gives form to the objects that we perceive. Are they coming from our
The form is just the consistency of a inconsistency. It's the consistency of a difference. The consistency of the difference simply refers to the way that a thing constitutes itself consistently in lieu of a fundamental difference. The fundamental difference being within reality itself and being the difference that gives rise to the distinction between reality and its reflection.
You still haven't described what gives it its difference. What gives it its identity?
Okay, what gives it its difference? That's a good question. The difference is what's primary. The difference is the real. That is the real. It's a contradiction.
What is the real? It just sounds like an abstraction.
It's. I literally just told you the real is a contradiction. It's a difference.
That's just tautological. You just said the distinction is the difference.
No, the real is is a distinction. Yes. Well, not a distinction. It's a difference. It's an immanent difference.
But what is the real? You still haven't described that.
What answer are you looking? Are you looking for a specific instance of the real, or what are you referring to?
No, you're just saying that there's a real that gives difference two things, but you still haven't given.
No, things are no
real
things.
is.
They
Like,
give
where
it
does
gives
being
difference to
come
things from the vantage point of what you call consciousness. That
Exactly. So it's consciousness. So it's idealism.
no, because the difference is in reality too. It's just that
How?
what makes different identities, like coherently different things, not the difference itself, but the fact that they are consistent, formally consistent things, is because of a more fundamental difference. Call it an absolute difference that grounds the very distinctions themselves.
It sounds like schizophrenic.
Well, okay, well, the logical structure is consistent, for example, with Kant.
Yeah, but Kant says time and space are ideal, that they're forms of our perception, and that we give
Right,
essentially
but time and
form.
space, as you should already know, are just derivative of the fact that there are discontinuities in the fabric of being, according to Kant. The discontinuity either takes the form of time or it takes the form of space. And
Yeah,
that's
but the time is our inner sense, and the space is our outer sense.
Yes, but it becomes that only because of the thing, the transcendental thing, the absolute object.
No, we can only recognize it when it's determined by an object which gives a limit to time and determines.
Yes, but what's anchoring all of that is the thing.
No, it's not either the thing or the form, it's the interwovenness of the form with the content, with the thing.
Listen, Kant talks about the particular things that give limits to time and space, but the only reason time and space are synthetic a priori in the first place is because there's a transcendental thing. That's what I'm trying to tell you. For Kant,
Yeah, but we can't ever know the transcendental thing. That's the thing in itself.
I
It's
know,
unknowable.
we can't know it, but it's still what gives ground to the synthetic a priori of time and space.
No, it's what time and space are the pure intuition of how we perceive that thing.
Yes,
But the thing in
yes,
itself is
yes.
unknowable. The
It's
thing
not
in itself-
knowable, so it's just a pure intuition. We
No,
don't
it's
know
just
it, but we have the pure
itself.
intuition of it in the form of time and space.
No, the thing in itself is what is impressing on our perception, and it's through time and space that we give it a determinate.
No, you
form.
cannot give a determinate form to the absolute object or the Kantian thing in itself.
Yes, that's how it becomes a phenomena.
Okay, Kant describes the thing as like God. It's like, he calls it, God is one of the synonyms for the thing. It's a transcendental thing.
Oh, that's just Hegelian like bullshit.
Really? Okay, let's see where Kant defines it as God
He
himself.
never defines it as God. He says God is actually unknowable because it's an object outside of human knowledge.
Yeah, and that also, do you think God has to be knowable?
No, and that's why he makes room for faith. But that still doesn't give any. He's not saying God is
A
something
transcendental
that is
thing? Sure he is. The infinite, the
he
absolute
is.
infinite being that's unknowable? Yes.
But it can't be known for sure. He calls it an illusion of
Listen,
reason.
it can't be known synthetically.
can't say
Hold on,
anything
it can't
about
hold on. It can't be known as a creature of logic, but in terms of the absolute certainties of faith, it can be known because it is known. Because our intuition of time and space is proof of our this like fundamental intuition that has no regard for what you think you know or what you don't know. It's a synthetic a priori. It's not a synthetic whatever the other one is. It's the only synthetic a priori. That's why there's room for faith.
The God is not the synthetic a priori.
I didn't say he was. I said he's the object of the synthetic a priori, according to Kant.
But he says we can't know God because all things of our knowledge need to be rooted
Right, just like we can't know the object of the synthetic a priori. We can't.
Yeah, we can't know the thing in itself.
Yeah, we can, but we still have a fucking intuition of time and space, regardless of our lack of knowledge of the thing. Because time and space are synthetic a priori, which means they're not based in our fucking knowledge. They're more like unconscious. They're not, according to, he doesn't use that word, but it's like, they're more like that.
They're preconditions for knowledge.
Yes, yes, the preconditions for knowledge are based in God, yes.
No, because he says we can never know God.
Just like, yeah, you can't, I didn't say you can know God. I didn't fucking say you can know God. I didn't fucking say you can know him.
Yeah, but there's a distinction because we can know the thing in itself has to exist unless it's just complete solipsism. But God can't be known because it's an object completely outside of knowledge.
What are you saying? Why does that make it different from the thing in itself?
Because the thing in itself, he says, does exist. It's just we can't make any determinate...
Just like God exists, but we can't make any determinate... Like, what's the difference?
No, that's not... He says God... He talks about God as in terms of faith. And it's part of our practical reason that if we're to have morality, that we need to believe in God. We need to believe in the immortality of the soul. But when it comes to our theoretical knowledge, we can't make any determinate...
I agree, but when it comes to our theoretical knowledge, we also can't know the object of the synthetic a priori either.
Yes, we can.
No, we can't, because it's a pure thing in itself. We can't know it.
It's pure being. It's the inner being.
Which we can't know. We can't know that, though.
Well, we can't know about any of its qualities, but we can know it has to exist.
Just like God.
Well, okay,
that's what faith means, by the way. It's an unconditional faith. It must exist, even if you can't know the specificities of its existence.
Okay, well, that's all still in the realm of idealism. So you've still basically...
Okay, well, I'm glad we've passed that hurdle. But you claim that the logical structure of what I was saying about materialism was like nonsense. But logically, it's pretty in parallel to the logical... It's not these same commitments in terms of conceptual commitments, but the logical structure is very similar to Kant. It's just they're inversed. Just like how Marx turns Hegel on his head. It's what I'm talking about here. Because the difference in terms of Kant is that Kant will posit concepts like things in themselves, for example, or synthetic a priori, which is a kind of commitment to the conceptual premise of being, right? Whereas what I'm talking about is just a difference within being itself that is fundamentally irreducible to any thoughts or ideas whatsoever.
It's still rooted in the transcendental structure of our knowledge.
No, I mean, that's not, no, it's not rooted in anything transcendental.
Yeah, it has to be rooted in our subjectivity, in our, unless you, that's why I asked.
No. Subjectivity is a relational... Subjectivity is just a relational term describing something going on in material reality.
No, that is what... Because we are the subject of perception and of knowledge. And we can't even know of an object outside of our own perception and of our
Yes,
own
we can, because in lieu of the fact of historical novelty, yes, we can. By the way, this is this is not even the supreme form of idealism, because Hegel would reject that view.
Because Hegel was a charlatan.
Okay, well, I just think you don't understand him, actually.
I just think he said a bunch of bullshit and didn't understand like Kant or anything about philosophy.
Well, saying Hegel didn't understand anything about philosophy is a pretty bold claim. You must be like the next genius of the whole world to claim something like that.
Hegel didn't even know about basic natural science. He thought he could prove the existence of using a priori that there's only...
Bro, how old are you?
21.
No, what's your real age? Because you sound very young, claiming nonsense like that.
No, I'm 21.
Okay, well, you're old enough to be responsible for your stupidity, but you're still young enough to say some stupid shit like Hegel doesn't know anything about...
Idealism.
What?
You don't know shit about philosophy if you don't even know the distinction between materialism and idealism.
I just explained to you the difference.
No, but you've still affirmed idealism.
No, I haven't, because I'm not relying on a transcendental structure of the world. And moreover, the claim that you cannot know anything outside of the transcendental structure is already rejected by the idealist Hegel. Hegel is an idealist, and he rejects that view. So it's you who doesn't know what idealism is, actually.
No, because the previous debate you had, the guy mentioned how Engels said that the only thing that exists is matter. Now you've had to reject that point of view by asserting that there is something of human consciousness and subjectivity that gives form to content.
No, okay, roll back the tape and show me where I said that.
You said that I asked what is content, and you said that content is the
orientation of the. No, I said materialism is the.
Its being is its identity, and its identity is rooted in the way that human.
No, I said most people assume matter is about identity. And then I said that's wrong, actually. So keep up with what I'm actually fucking saying if you're going to claim that I don't know anything about idealism and materialism.
Claims.
What?
You're just saying bullshit then. You're not making any you're telling me what it's
If you're saying I just said bullshit, then you have come to your limit as far as your intellectual capacity for engaging in this debate.
You affirmed Kant's transcendental
No,
structure.
I did not. Because Kant's transcendental idealism does ultimately have to make a metaphysical commitment to the synthetic a priori and the thing in itself. And that is ultimately a metaphysical creature of the conceptual mind. So no, that is not an affirmation of Kantian idealism. And the problem that I have right now is that this is old stuff. This has been resolved in the past. But you came here and told me something so stupid that Hegel didn't know anything about philosophy. Then you are not qualified to talk about philosophy. You're 21 years old. Have you really read Hegel enough to make that claim with any credibility or authority? That just sounds like a really stupid thing to say. You're an arrogant kid who needs to fucking humble themselves. You have not figured out, you're not God, you haven't figured out the whole fucking keys to all knowledge in the world. I know you feel like you're smart because it's your cope among your peers. For
what
your
makes
social.
you the authority on this subject then?
All I'm doing is committing. I'm just committing to my statements. I'm not God. I could be wrong. It's just you're going to have to make an argument relating to what I've said.
Disprove Kant.
We're not talking about disproving Kant right now, something Hegel already did, by the way. We can debate about Hegel versus Kant another time. I'd love to have that debate. But right now, we're talking about idealism versus materialism. And I've explained to you what form actually is. Form is not actually based in form, which means form has no essential reality. That means forms do not exist. Form is just the affect whereupon the fundamental material difference out of which arises the reflection of matter back upon itself is posited across its particular discontinuities. In a way, the claim I just said there's a logical parallel to Kantian idealism, not that they're the same thing. It's just a logical parallel. In Kantian idealism, you're still dealing with eternal and infinite forms. In my case, form is just an affect of material difference, okay? So they're not in any way the same thing. I'm not affirming Kant's transcendental structure that posits the existential reality of, or the metaphysical reality of forms or ideas. I'm not fucking doing that, okay? So you need to actually engage with the debate as it's developed so far. You haven't done that.
You haven't actually explained what gives the content its difference. You've just asserted that its difference is what makes it what gives it its
I believe in the ontological or metaphysical primacy of difference.
So that's idealism. If you're asserting metaphysics
no, it's not.
And the primacy
I'm using metaphysics for purposes of simplification. I believe in the ontological primacy of difference. Yes.
But that still doesn't give an account for what gives it its difference.
What gives what its difference?
The content. If you're saying that, okay, we have a substance, it's
Content
matter.
implies difference. Already, the word itself implies difference.
No, it doesn't. Form
yes, it does.
Difference.
No, if you are referring
Form
to
gives things their different.
retard.
You don't know the basic premises of philosophy.
Retard. If you just claim only content exists, how exactly is that how is that different from saying only form exists? What's the difference? How are form and content defined separate from one another? They imply the reality of the other. When you say content, you're saying something at the expense of form. Otherwise, there is no meaningful use of the word content. None.
Content just refers to the permanent substance of reality, which is...
No, I reject that. Because if you claim that content is referring to a permanent substance, that permanent substance, it begs the question, if it's going to be a consistent permanent subject that you can speak about, you're giving it form. That means you believe in an eternal form of reality, and it's the same thing. It is
the form is the consciousness that gives it its reality.
No, it is the same thing. If you only look at content one-sidedly, it's form. If you look at form one-sidedly, it's content. It's the same exact thing. There's no difference. Actually, I take that back. If you look at only form, you get form. If you look at only content, you get form. The only way to arrive at content is at the expense of form.
At the expense of form. So without form, you arrive at content?
No. When you recognize that form is either internally inconsistent, incomplete, or not actually something that exists. Existing is different from being. I hope you know that. Then you can say that this is the content of the thing. Here's the form, but this is the real key to it. This is the riddle solved. This is the essence of the matter. That's what the content means.
The content is not the essence. The form...
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. If I say
this is a chair, the form is the chair. The content is the substance of the chair, which it shares with all of the other...
Hold on, no. If you say there's a chair, and the form, according to you, is the form of the chair, the way it's shaped, or whatever, the mechanical, whatever, the engineering that goes into a chair, and I say, okay, then what is the content of a chair? You're referring to the foundational basis out of which the form is wrought. Like, for example, why is there a chair? Well, the content of a chair is either the production, the means of its production, or the use the chair has for... Why do we define a chair as a chair, for example? Well, because we sit on it, right? Either way, you are going not only beyond the bounds of forms, but at the content of the form, the basis. That's what it is.
You mean content in terms of its practicality?
No, it does. I only named that as one example of its content. Another example of the content of a chair, why do we define chairs as chairs, is the means of its production.
So
the means of its assembly, the means of its production, the significance the chair has of why it becomes an intelligible thing defined apart from the rest of reality. That is not reducible to its form. If it's not reducible to its form, we're talking about its content.
But that's still rooted in the human subjectivity of the person.
You can cope. You can claim that. You can claim that it's a metaphysical claim. You can cope it. You can cope about that. But
how can you say that? Oh, what is the means of the means of production?
Listen, you come to me with a one-sided definition of reality that's devoid of human subjectivity, and then you say, "Oh, well, look at human subjectivity is involved in this. Oh, it proves idealism." Wait a second, but my understanding of material reality accounts for and entails something like subjectivity arising from it.
Because in the materialist view, the mind is just brain. It's just matter.
No,
it's just matter arranged in a certain way that gives rise to
all the
consciousness.
materialist view entails is that reality has to be real enough and worthy enough
What is the mind? What is the mind?
All it means is that reality has to be real enough and worthy enough to give rise to a mind, or to at least have a mind be a part of it, or be compatible with its being, be compatible with its being.
Then what is the account for the mind in the materialist worldview? It's just that it's brain and
The mind,
arranged in a certain way.
The reality of the mind says something about material being. That's what it means. You don't first say how do you
secondary.
You're thinking in a reductionist way. You don't first say what can we reduce the mind to? You say if the mind is something real or significant to us, that says something about material being. That's the only significance materialism has. It's not a reductionist or metaphysical view. If it is, it's not one shared by Marx and Engels, who explicitly reject metaphysics. They reject reductionism and metaphysics.
Engels said that matter is everything. So the mind is just matter.
Okay, but you are making an unjust, just like my prior debate opponent, you are making the unjustifiable assumption that matter is some kind of substance.
Oh, matter is flux. It's motion and flux.
That's what I think.
Yeah, that's a materialist viewpoint. It's just everything's just in flux.
I do believe everything's in flux.
That still doesn't give an account for the immaterial nature of the mind, of being itself.
What makes you think the mind or being is not in flux? It is.
It's not just motion in flux. There's an immaterial, irreducible quality to it that you can describe.
The problem is, no, all there is a contradiction, and that contradiction allows for states of being to arise out of the flux of being. Because the flux of being is nothing more than the flux. Movement implies contradiction. If there's no contradiction, there's no movement. So when you talk about a flux, you're already entailing an immanent difference within the fabric of being. And that difference already implies that out of the flux arises the identity of the flux, or the discrete being of the flux, the oneness of the flux. That contradiction is what dialectical materialism is about. It has nothing to do with being unable to account for minds or the intellect.
It does, because even how we describe motion is still rooted in how we view consciousness, and how consciousness gives rise to those things. That's the problem with materialism.
Why is that necessary? Why is that a necessary conclusion?
Because it's okay, how does the physical sciences work unless it's a mind that's perceiving phenomena in the world?
I'm not talking about physical sciences. Why does flux imply that consciousness creates reality?
Because it implies it's just matter in flux.
So why does that imply that it's consciousness that's creating reality? Why can't there actually be matter in flux as the actual pre-Socratics believed? Why do you have to have this absurd view that it's a creation of consciousness or a projection of consciousness?
Because it can't give account for
I agree that we can't describe it without consciousness, but where do you get to the view that it owes its existence to consciousnness immanently?
Because you can't describe anything outside of human consciousness.
Okay, wait. The inability to describe things outside of the means of description does not mean there are no things outside of consciousness. You realize that, right? So let me get this straight.
About themselves.
So you're saying that if we can't describe reality without describing it, that means reality is reducible to the description or the means of the description?
No, it means
That
that
is
we
an
have to give.
incoherent,
It means we have to
nonsensical claim.
No, it means
Nonsensical claim.
we have to acknowledge the primacy of the way in which we are even able to give descriptions of reality.
Why is that not itself part of reality? Why is that not immanent to reality as an object? Why is that something
It's
apart
not
from
an
reality?
object of knowledge.
Saying
It's
reality is
transcendental.
listen,
That's the whole
saying
point of Kant. They're the transcendental forms of our knowledge.
no, that's a stupid cope, and
It's not an argument.
look, that's an LGBT cope. That's just what it is. Okay.
Hegel's an LGBT.
No, that's
code.
Kant, and
Marxism is entirely LGBT. Fucking the most postmodern.
Okay, Ernest
liberal
Röhm. All
philosophy.
right, Ernest Röhm. Well, they didn't have that in the Soviet Union. But anyway, here's the thing. What you're talking about is you're saying reality itself is not enough for reality. But if all that implies is that an imminent difference of not only an imminent difference of reality with regard to itself, but any finite projection of reality by the intellect not satisfying the being, actual being. I think that gives more credence to materialism than idealism.
Irreducible. Why do you think Heidegger was a continuation off of Kant? Because he's
He
talking.
wasn't.
About
Heidegger rejects Kant.
No, he affirms Kant.
Nope, he rejects him.
Phenomenology wouldn't be.
Heidegger rejects phenomenology. Listen, you're talking about Heidegger's you're talking about
being in time.
No, who the fuck am I referring to? I can't believe I forgot him. You're talking about Husserl. You're talking about Husserl. Heidegger took a big, huge leap from all of that neo-Kantian shit. I mean, even Husserl is not really a neo-Kantian, but Heidegger just completely takes an Olympic leap, a sudden, abrupt discontinuity with all the neo-Kantian origins. And Heidegger sets on fire his neo-Kantian origins completely. It's the so-called Marxist, Western Marxist, Lukács, which is still a Kantian. Heidegger thinks, oh my God, Kant gave us this incredibly insane Marxism from Lukács. He must be burned. Not only him, but Plato. Not only Kant, but Descartes, and then even Plato. There needs to be a complete new beginning for all of thought. So
it's
no,
not materialism. So I don't know.
It's not
mingle in Heidegger with Marxism.
I actually will sit here and say Heidegger is a materialist. I will.
He's not. He rejects materialism flat out.
He rejects all metaphysics, and he cannot think. He does not acknowledge materialism beyond metaphysics. Granted. But as far as what Marx and Engels meant by materialism, Heidegger is fulfilling materialist thinking in the 20th century, yes. Heidegger is an ontological materialist. He is a materialist. He's the first materialist for the sphere of ontology.
You should read his letters on humanism because you're taking the basically.
I don't care what he's. Of course, he rejects humanism and so on.
Yeah, he rejects this idea that it's just about humanity.
You know what? Dude.
You don't understand.
You're jumping all over the place. You're jumping all over the place. I know you see these historical figures as action figures on different teams, and you're trying to make it seem like I'm implying Heidegger's a Marxist and therefore a humanist Marxist.
That's what you're trying to do, and it doesn't work. It just looks fucking.
You want to stop crying? You're in passioned rage.
You're coping so hard,
dude.
Because you just got fucking destroyed. Because you don't know anything about
your
philosophy.
Nasal voice. Are you something in your nose or something? Listen, you're trying to make these historical figures action figures and make it seem like I'm trying to claim Heidegger as a Marxist. I'm not saying he's a fucking Marxist.
You said he's the first Marxist in the realm of ontology.
While you had shit stuffed up your nose and you have some shit in your ass, you have a stick in your ass, it seems like you couldn't hear me correctly call him a materialist, not a Marxist. I never once called him a Marxist.
He's not a materialist either.
I do think his leap was a materialist leap away from the neo-Kantianism, which ultimately culminates in either, some like Karl Popper bullshit or Lukács. I mean, yes, he founds what we call continental philosophy. And continental philosophy distinguishes itself from the so-called Anglo-Saxon analytical school because it rejects because it rejects the view that axioms and propositions of logic and thought are the only manner by which reality is accessible to thought. And they reject this view. And they reject the most advanced form of idealism, which is the analytical retardation.
It literally has zero to do with materialism at all.
Yes, it does. Because what?
In fact, empiricists are the materialists. That's what Marx tried to do. He took Hegel's bullshit method of dialectics, and then he took British things of this like capitalism.
I've never read Marx. Explicitly rejects that view. Explicitly rejects that view.
Soy science. Like, we're gonna take this Anglo like science and mix it with like Hegel's like method of dialectics.
I have some farmland that needs I have some farmland that needs like fertilizer, because I know you're just digging in your ass and getting random shit you're pulling out of your ass. Can you at least get some shit to fertilize my land, please? Because my crops need some more shit from your ass to pull out. I mean, you've never read a fucking word of Marx. Marx explicitly rejects one-sided materialism and the he literally calls empiricism a collection of dead facts. He rejects this view. He even rejects the so-called materialism of Spinoza, which is far more sophisticated than the English kind. He thoroughly and unambiguously rejects all hitherto forms of materialism. And he writes this in something as simple as the thesis on Feuerbach, where he claims, thus far, materialism has never afforded consideration to the active side of humanity. It has always dealt with reality in a one-sided, mechanical, or metaphysical way. So calling it soy science, betrays such a retarded ignorance, a basic ignorance of the thing you are so passionately trying to talk about and exude knowledge of.
Did he not say that socialism is scientific, that it must be scientific?
What is, okay, all science implies is a form or a system of knowledge. What is wrong with that?
No, it doesn't just imply that.
Yes, it does. It actually just implies that. Yes,
it implies that we can understand physics, which is the most bullshit. This is what Heidegger was exactly against: this reduction of humanity and being to this technological.
Give me one passage from Karl Marx that proves he's a reductionist. Just one.
He thinks that the entire...
No, an actual passage from Karl Marx himself. Not you, from your ass. From Karl Marx himself.
Does he not talk about the base and the superstructure, and that the base...
Give me one passage from Karl Marx himself that can definitively ground him as a reductionist. One fucking passage. One passage. Just one.
Address the ideas that are mentioned, not some
No, I don't give a fuck about your ignorance of reality and your stupid prejudices and impressions of things. I want evidence this is coming from Marx and not from your own ass or your dumb Discord friend, retard LARPers.
Where does he say base and superstructure? Is that what you're asking?
The manner by which Marx even talks about base and superstructure excludes the possibility of any reductionism. So I don't even think you want to go there. So please find me where he talks about any reductionism.
I don't read Marx's primary sources. I just read secondary sources. He's not.
I can tell. I can actually tell.
Yeah, but I can still understand the ideas and the fact.
No, you can't. You can know nothing and say nothing about Marx. You can know nothing and say nothing of Marx in a way that is not clouded by the prejudice of his opponents. That is not an objective or mature.
Point to me where he did not talk about the base and superstructure.
A thesis on Feuerbach, where he explicitly rejects a one-sided reductionist materialism.